All right, let's go to Sean Potts for the view from the Piper's Corner jury. Sean, how are you?
Very good, Jer.
So this is very difficult. We've myself and Owen, obviously, it's in our interest to split Dublin to get this conversation going properly. We all think that Dublin has become too big of a beast, and this is proof. Too many, a festoon of great sporting people that we should be carving into a mountain. Too many people for anyone.
The transparency of your agenda was quite pathetic, actually.
So just let's establish your credentials. You're a proper Northside Dub. You've been in the Northside Dub for your whole life. Is that were you
born and bred? Yeah. I grew up on the Navan Road and moved into town, then eventually to Marino. I live just off the Malahide Road now. So yeah, I spent my life on the north side of Dublin.
And who were your sporting heroes as a kid?
I'm very much the Dublin football. I was a Leeds United fan as a kid, and then Dublin won the All-Ireland final in '74. So my mother was actually an unapologetic band woman. So I was playing soccer with Bar boys, and when it came to actually signing properly for them, she wouldn't let me. So it was old-fashioned stuff. So it was hauled up with sunkets, you know. So then Dublin won the All-Ireland '74. It very much transformed the sporting landscape in the city from children's perspective and just the perspective of supporters and fans and being drawn into something, you know. My heroes on that Dublin team, probably David Hickey and Brian Mullins. Brian Mullins remained a hero of mine throughout my life because I just thought he was the rock on which they built that team, you know, and Kevin Heffernan was such an iconic leader. So that we were steeped in that. We were very lucky to be, you know, fortunate to, you know, to be a child during that era. It's a, you know, very influential period of their lives. Now, having said that, none of them have made it onto my Mount Rushmore, but they were my childhood heroes and remain so. And, I think David Hickey, if you broaden the scope or criteria of Mount Rushmore, and I'm also conscious that you're probably sick to death of Mount Rushmore at this stage. It's very much a lockdown thing, but just to get to the end of it, David Hickey would certainly figure very prominently because I always consider him one of the great Irishmen. Given, and he was an exemplary figure in terms of what an amateur footballer was, and you know, to reach the peak he did as an athlete, but also then to contribute so much to our society in terms of being the first carrying the first kidney transplant in Ireland, and to be such a sort of influential figure in the world of Irish medicine, and a no shrink of violet when it came to asserting his views about society in general. But a fantastic leader, fantastic Irishman, and my wife was very fortunate to work with him for a while in Beaumont Hospital, and she's never stopped talking about him since.
I think that stuff is important. Like, you know, ultimately you get to pick your own. So I can see why you'd have somebody like David Hickey on. Can I just go back to one thing? You said you're a Leeds fan. Does that mean John Giles is on your list? Because we had Kenny Cunningham on just there, and he was picking. He's obviously Northsider as well. He put Liam Brady ahead of Giles.
Oh my God. No, not really, because I'm sort of much as like my mother, I became an unapologetic GA person subsequently. So while I still always keep an eye out for Leeds and very much enjoyed the last run in this year, albeit without fans, because I think that actually contributed in getting over the line in the end. I've had to stop just short of picking 4 GA men on my Mount Rushmore, and out of magnanimity, I went for a GA child, as in Pádraig Harrington, because I just can't ignore his contribution on the world stage of sports, you know, to win back-to-back opens, and you know, the son of a GA man, and indeed he tells a great story of Mark and Desi Farrell in schools match in Croke Park, where he actually holds his hand up and says Desi destroyed him during that game. But I think Desi counters that somewhat. But wonderful Dublin sports character, great humble man, very ordinary guy. I've been fortunate to meet him a couple of times when we worked with him in the Gaelic Players Association. But I think he's been a wonderful ambassador for sport. No more than Shane Lowry, I think his background contributes to that, you know. And I think, you know, that's some of the power of sort of amateur sport as well, that they're drawn back to the like amateur hurling and football, both of them, you know. And so, but I couldn't, I think, in all conscious pick 4 Dublin sports people without picking Harrington.
Are we considering Pádraig Harrington an Northsider here?
I'm not picking Northside. This is a.
Oh, I see.
This is a fabricated. This is a fabricated split on the part of Newcastle.
No, honestly, it's not. It isn't. It isn't. I'll tell you what we're doing. We're picking 4. We're going to do 4 from the north, 4 from the south, and then there'll be a final mountain at the end. There is a final day. So we are legitimately looking for the best Northsiders, and I'm fairly sure Harrington's going to make a cut the whole way through. So, do you legitimately have 4 Northsiders? Would that be possible?
No, I don't, because Harrington's Southsider. But I'm trying to think of the other 3. No, of 2 Southsiders, 2 Northsiders.
So you've got Cluxton. Am I saying you've got Cluxton and Heffernan? Are they 2?
No, I have Cluxton.
Right.
My third was Kevin Moran.
Okay. I think there's going to be a strong case made for Kevin Moran. Brian Kerr is doing the needful on Thursday.
Okay. I think you got to, the criteria for your Mount Rushmore is purely subjective on my part. But anyway, I think no one will ever do what Moran did again. It's just a remarkable story. He was on with you guys there a couple of weeks ago. I was listening to him, and I never stopped listening to his story because I could listen to it for the rest of my life. To achieve what he did, think about it. He signed for United like in the spring of, I think, 1978, and to play in the All-Ireland final later that year, just coming back the week before the game, like just walked straight back into the squad and straight back onto the team. To have the United manager sitting in the stand while Moran was getting battered on the field, essentially, split head, torn hamstring, it's the stuff of childhood kind of dreams, and he encapsulated that, and no one has really ever been able to let that go. A wonderful character to go on then, and 10 brilliant years with United, as tough as nails, credible athlete, a wonderful character. Some of the stories he recounts, particularly when he was playing with Ireland, they needed a draw with Holland, and they essentially decided they were going to play out the game with the Dutch and to knock the ball around, and all of a sudden the ball was passed to him from Mick McCarthy, and he turned around, hang on a second, we'd never passed the ball to each other ever, so they knocked it back down the other end. Told Van Basten, the lads, you knock it among yourselves, we don't want to, but brilliant character, incredible footballer, very dashing, it added a great dynamic to Heffernan, lifelong desire to actually defeat Kerry. I mean, Heffer was absolutely obsessed with beating Kerry, and Moran became a very intrinsic part of that. I think even in the first few minutes of the All-Ireland final in '76, he laid down a marker. It's an awful pity he didn't score one of those dashing goals, because he missed both of them where he ran the length of the field. But nonetheless, I couldn't. He always comes back when I'm talking about heroes, sporting heroes, to somebody who had to achieve to span those 2 great feats.
So he was a really good footballer as well as being a successful soccer player. I think probably that aspect of the career might not be as widely talked about, primarily because that team goes on and has more success even after he leaves, and also because the fact is he's part of the '88 team, that creates history from an Irish perspective, and maybe I don't really fully understand myself just how good a Gaelic footballer he was.
Well, we only had that number of short years, but he was very much part of Heffo's technique of putting Kerry on the back foot. Heffo's plan to put Kerry on the back foot in '76. He, by his own admission, he said he was a better Gaelic footballer than a soccer player, but that might be only just playing down his success as a soccer player. He was certainly hard. He was incredibly athletic, fast, and powerful, and he went on to prove that throughout his professional career. He was brilliant in the box. He was a brilliant centre half. He put his head in where it mattered. And I think, he said technically he wasn't very gifted as a soccer player. And he realised that when he went over. But he was certainly as hard and as fit as the United players at the time when he first went over. But I can only remember as an incredibly dashing a halfback. When I was 9 years of age when he came to prominence, and it was short lived. But he was very much for that run alone. And I think there was years ago when they picked the greatest sporting moment of all time. I think it was Michael Donlan's run became the greatest. Only in the J could we pick a run, but actually it was a great score. It was a great score at the end of it. But he had he nailed one of those scores, it would have been it's never been forgotten. But anyway, it was very much laying down the mark at Kerry in '76, and he was wonderful again in the '77 semi-final against Kerry. And he probably wasn't as well tuned in when they played in '78. It's quite remarkable when you think of it. Imagine just dropping in on the Tuesday or Wednesday before the All-Ireland final and actually just rejoining the panel, and then to actually play a sneaky game out in New York the following year, and he's still playing with Manchester United in the Sister Concilio or whatever match. But I think they knocked the sugar out of each other in New York, Dublin, and Kerry. So I think he was part of that as well. So.
It's mad that they kill each other even in the friendlies. Okay, so Kevin Moran is on your mountain. Technically, we're going to deal with him on the south side stuff. Who are your Northsiders? Give us your Northsiders at least that we can 100% nailed on.
Okay. Stephen Cluxton has been arguably the most significant Gaelic footballer, if not of the modern era of all time. He revolutionised the game. I suppose he's fortunate as an athlete to have spent now 19 years playing at the top level. But he helped. He was part of what I would consider sort of a perfect storm for Dublin's opponents, and certainly what kickstarted this incredible period of Dublin dominance in Gaelic football. There was three brilliant managers came together at the one time, or certainly overlapping. Pat Gilroy broke the mold, as it were. At least he changed what was considered an unsuccessful culture in Dublin football, in that there was plenty of talent and a lot of dash, but they seemed to be sort of plagued with hubris and individuality, and that's one of the criticisms from great footballers and people who made, like all Gaelic footballers, huge commitment and sacrifice to perform at the top level. But in terms of getting over the line and sort of breaking that dominance of Kerry and Tyrone in the previous decade, Gilroy really instigated that change. But he then brought in a number of players who had already been through the hands of Jim Gavin, then under 21 manager, and at the same time, Desi Farrell was moulding a new breed of young players at minor level. And I think you got three incredibly gifted and talented people in charge of intercounty football in Dublin during that period, and I think it all sort of fed into each other. Like beating Kerry in 2011, albeit with a late rally, and they're the margins you're working off. It transformed the mindset of a group of already talented young players who had tasted success. So Gilroy actually, that achievement was absolutely enormous. And then Gavin's come into that. But just at that period, we actually struggled. One of the drawbacks we had in the 2000s was the absence of good free takers, and Bernard Brogan was good from close range, but Cluxton's contribution for dead ball kicking from distance was a huge and contributory factor to Dublin getting over the line. But his leadership in terms of, I think it was Gilroy changed the name of kickouts to possession restarts, and the possession game was starting to kick in and become the tactical approach of choice at that level. And his kicking ability is extraordinary. To be able to put out the ball like he did and pick out from different ranges, and then modify that as the game changed, because the game changes so quickly and has, even front of us all, be able to change that and various kicks, and then to become the sort of fulcrum of the whole sort of team in terms of driving it. His commitment to practice and to being the very best he can, I have no doubt has been an enormous inspiration to those around him. I think what we don't always see, and it may be tried in some way, but we talk about the sacrifices that are made, and there's debates about advantages for counties and all that stuff. But you leave it aside, the sacrifice that he has made for nearly 2 decades of his life to be as good as he possibly could be, and don't forget, was part of a team that was unsuccessful for a period and suffered a lot of setbacks,
Yeah, I think that bit's actually almost as impressive as anything. So I was just looking it up there. In 2011, he just turned 30, I think, around the time of the All-Ireland final. And when you think about that, like his greatness, because that's obviously one of the seasons where he's at his most impactful, but it's after that, like, that he just gets better and better and better at a stage when most intercounty players are like, okay, I've got my All-Ireland one, I'm in my 30s, I'm going to go off now and see what else is out there. It's the longevity is something as well on top of this. I think that, you know, when you're chasing somebody on the mountain.
Yeah, he got better during the period when the focus was sharpening on his own performances. Like as the keeper became and driven by his sort of pioneering role as an athlete within Gaelic games. Like as the game was changing, the focus was sharpening on him all the time. Kerry were obsessed with it, in inverted commas, going to say cracking him, you know, and claimed to have cracked him a couple of times, which they did. They put a press on him, but his response to those sort of pressurized situations is what has marked him apart. And there are a number of wonderful keepers who followed in his footsteps in the game today, and would very much look to him as the standard bearer in that regard, because he is a pioneering footballer. But he like as the pressure was increasing on him all the time, he got better. And even when he did, you know, when Rock then emerged as a senior footballer and relieved him, I'm sure, thankfully on his part, from the free taking duties, he still managed to vary his game, to develop, to become better, to respond to, you know, saving a couple of penalties in the last two championships, including in last year's drawing game. Just doing its fundamental goalkeeping duties, you know. Like, and you see, I mean, even when Kerry I tried over a number of years to hit that long diagonal ball, which is always favoured by them, how solid he is behind it, you know, and how, you know, and look, your goalkeeper is absolutely fundamental. It always was, but actually in today's game, more important than ever.
Okay, I think there's people, in terms of if there's only going to be one Gaelic football representative in the final decision, Cluxton's right there. I would have said alongside Hefo. Why is Hefo not on yours as a matter of interest?
Oh, I don't know. I can't, because I've only tried to pick four. Again, he was the man that broke the mold, and I think in terms of his leadership, I just, probably to do with contemporary athletes and knowing these guys and seeing them firsthand, if I was just to whittle it down, that's the only reason. It's purely because I think Jim Gavin has certainly matched Hefo's managerial contribution. I think, you know, two of them of their year. Kevin, as a manager in the 70s, changed the culture. Gavin, extraordinary achievement to you know, to remain as unflappable and his attention to detail during the years, and to delegate and oversee sort of great tacticians in his management team has been wonderful. But in the middle of that, I'd still rank Pat Gilroy's achievements alongside both those managers, because Gilroy, again, like Hefo, getting the breakthrough in '74, that breakthrough in 2011, you know, if that Gooch puts them 4 ahead or 5 ahead with a free, it could have been 5 ahead, and things just peter out for them. The script might not have ended up the way it was. You know, you do need to get that breakthrough. The sort of the confidence that comes with a team from winning. I think Hefo, Gilroy, and Jim Gavin and Dave, they understand the importance of winning. Sometimes we're talking about sport nowadays because it's about inclusivity and, you know, children's sport and moving away from the ultra competitive stuff at a young age, which is all very, very important. But at some point that has to stop. And like Gaelic football at the top level is about being better than the other crowd. And I think that all those managers were driven by that. They're all competitive athletes themselves. Hefo, a wonderful footballer, incredible record himself at club and county. But I just think I just wanted to pick players who really moved me over the years, and that's why I would have picked Cluxton. It draws me on to the last of my Mount Rushmore selection, which is a true outsider.
Yeah,
James McCarthy. James McCarthy.
Right.
James McCarthy has become my favourite footballer for a lot of reasons, and a team of full of absolute legendary footballers. The reason being that he, despite being a phenomenal athlete, a tremendous footballer, hard as nails, great ability to drive a team, it's showing up when you absolutely most need him. And I think because Dublin have been so dominant, the closeness of those battles over the years, especially with Mayo, are sometimes overlooked. I know they're not generally overlooked, but they were on a precipice for so many. But particularly the 2015 semi-final replay, where again, I think Lee Keegan had missed a chance and McCarthy got down punished on the other end of the field. 2017 final, last 10 minutes. McCarthy usually shows, even in the Kerry games last year, he shows during that critical period where the game's actually being won. Phenomenal like that. Great players do that, of course, and that's what marks him, in my view, apart. In fact, a recent gathering of friends, prompted by the Mount Rushmore series, when we were picking our favourite sort of athletes of all time, I wouldn't be afraid to pick a Gaelic footballer just because the game is a domestic game and doesn't have an international outlet. McCarthy, for me, would be one of those players who ranks alongside the likes of Roy Keane and stuff in football, who showed when it mattered most. And not only that, he's been detailed with a lot of hard jobs over the years when, he's sort of deputised in midfield, although he's an actual sort of wing back or centre back, but he's deputised in there, and he's often put on the player that needs to be quietened. And a lot of McCarthy's work is just that absolutely grueling, running somebody into the ground. And even if you watch him with David Moran in last season's replay, a lot of the dummy runs, a lot of the work off the ball is all McCarthy, before, of course, showing up in that last critical 10-minute period with a couple of points.
I know you're trying to rail against the narrative of a North versus South GAA thing here, but I don't know what your worry is. Like, I mean, that North Dublin list of candidates is clearly going to win 5 in a row alone. Like, I mean,
well, as a Kerry man, I certainly won't be lectured by a Kerry man on whether Dublin should be. This debate should be. If I was to face my cousins in good counsel, my first cousins, my uncle's family have always been involved in football, hurling, and Cook Council, and the thought that we would be going to Croke Park as rivals is unconscionable, quite frankly.
It's fair enough.
Don't worry, I can't see it happening, but anyway, we all live near neighbours who we have to go to war with. If so, your subs essentially Brian Mullins, David Hickey. Who else was close to making your?
David Hickey and Brian Mullins as players, Giles would have been a hero of mine as a child for sure, if to be more magnanimous in sporting terms. I don't know enough. I'm not a follower of rugby, so I'll hold my hands up. I know Driscoll's going to come into the reckoning here. He's an incredible athlete and incredibly brave and fearless as a warrior at that top level sport. But it's not a game I follow very closely, so I couldn't attest to his greatness in the rugby context, other than received wisdom. He's a brilliant player, but certainly in Gaelic football terms, Hickey and Mullins were childhood heroes of mine. I've maintained that narrative about great managers, and I will go back to obviously Kevin Heffernan, because he broke the mold in '74, and he engendered that. You often hear the debate in Gaelic football or hurling about, we put in the same effort as the top teams, we make the same sacrifices, and at a certain level there's a truth to that, and I understand that there's guys travelling up and down from the country for training and all, but if you tease this out with some managers who've gone to some of the smaller counties to train them, who were involved, for example, with stronger counties, you'll often find quietly the story coming back that some of the players are not actually performing or preparing at the same level as their counterparts in the stronger counties. I think Heffo brought that into Dublin in '74. He changed regime. His training regime was brutal. In context of '73, '74, Dublin players were languishing. The famous Gay O'Driscoll story about playing for Dublin on a Sunday and going into work and not letting anyone know he played for Dublin the day before. I mean, nobody knew he worked because he was sort of embarrassed about their performances at the time. But so he changed it. And I think all great teams have been driven by managers like that. Mick O'Dwyer was no different. Mick O'Dwyer was absolutely obsessive about winning, about being the best. And it wasn't some pastiche thing about how wonderful Kerry was. I was very close friends with Paddy O'Shea, and he always spoke about how they became very they were insular, like they were sort of separated from their fans. They were separated from. This was about them as a group being better than everybody else, and so I think Hefo certainly engendered Dublin with that. Pat Gilroy then did it in 2009, 2010, and into 2011. He changed the culture. There's a lot of stories about how he you know, they were hammered by Meath in that Leinster Championship game. They shipped 5 goals. I think there was a number of you know, set up experiments on the go at the time with the panel. And I think he went back to the panel and said, right lads, you know, this is gonna, it has to work this way, where we work tirelessly in all areas of the field to win, to get over the line, and we don't, under pressurized situations, revert to individuality. We're a collective, and that work rate goes to a new level. And the first signs of that actually were there to be seen in 2010, where they actually, for the first time, I think in 15 years, bet one of the top teams, and they actually defeated Tyrone. I think they defeated Armagh, the back door, before going on, but actually defeating Tyrone, who albeit were on the wane at the time. A huge breakthrough, and again, Jim Gavin and Desi Farrell then both involved at underage level. Look at the players that came through their hands. I mean, the ones that Desi had from, like, the likes of Kieran Kilkenny and Cormac Coslow, Jack McCaffrey, he had them at development squad level. So he was. I'm not saying they didn't have innate talent, but that's only part of the story. They were going through the hands of very forward-looking managers, and I think all of them would imbue their players with that idea that, you know, sacrifice is something that you must deal with. You have to work it into your life, both off the field and on the field. That, like, the sacrifices you're making as a young man, for example, on one of those teams, with all your, you know, people doing the normal things that young people do. The sacrifice you're making is something worth doing in terms of your lived experience, and not to be too wishy-washy about it. I think all those managers would look on football that way, and you know, and I think the signs are on it then when you see their behaviour, you know, on and off the field. They play to the whistle, and they're never really beaten. Their contribution, as you can see off the field, is tremendous. They're a wonderful bunch of characters, and I know there's a strain with the media that they're not accessible because they see the long term goal in terms of. I understand that it creates a kind of attention, but it's something that it doesn't bother the players. I don't think, you know.
They're relatively accessible by comparison to some other counties. One character we haven't spoken about in the middle of all this is Mickey Whelan, who ties those two generations of teams together. It's a direct link from Hefo to Pat Gilroy, and that he was on the sideline for both of them, and kind of was probably one of the inspirations for that brutal strength and conditioning campaign that you were talking about in the 70s as well. He's not going to make the list. He's obviously not at that level, but, like, I think when you start to get into, in particular, the Dublin Gaelic football team, that there are a few sets of fingerprints that are on it that are consistent over the period of time, and he's clearly been kind of the godfather in some ways of Dublin football from the 70s all the way through.
Yeah, he was. I suppose when he did get a chance as manager, he was probably ahead of the game. You know, he was. I know Desi Farrell is on the record of saying that he probably gave the players too much leeway and he trusted them too much, and that the whip hand probably wasn't applied as it should have been, probably in '96, you know, and the wake of winning the All Ireland in '95. But you know, he was a wonderful footballer himself, of course, and he went to America and he learned his trade, and he was always looking at the development of the athletes. I mean, he's the living proof of continuous sort of professional development, because he's still going, and a remarkable character, wonderful man, and a hugely influential figure. I think in again that breakthrough with Gilroy. It's no surprise that Gilroy looked to Mickey to contribute to that Dublin team, and even had him back again with the hurlers when during his brief spell in charge there. I think he'd there was strain with Heffo in the 70s. I think after the 75, finally, I think he criticised Heffo for that the team are fit enough, and so he was very, he had great foresight in terms of sport development, and I think it was a pity that the game was lagging behind even in the mid 90s I think from what Mickey really was trying to achieve, and I think he came into his own with Gillette as the game was modernising, and he had this wonderful bunch of sort of athletes to work with, who probably bought into the sort of modern way of sport, as it were.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, there's going to be a crowd of Southsiders nominating 4 Southsiders for us tomorrow here, Sean. And they're going to be naming Harrington for sure, and probably Kevin Moran as well. So you're giving up 2 slots for 2 of your people.
As I said from the outset here, I'm not buying into this contrived split of our county. My mother will disown me if I do. Both my parents were born. Well, they're born in the south inner city, so they're both.
They're going to have
also.
Harrington. They're going to have Harrington on their mountain, and okay, grand. We can grandfather in a few after later on, because Brady as the footballer was interesting from Kenny Cunningham. I don't know if you've got a view on the hierarchy of Northside football, because I think Paul McGrath should actually be on Dublin's Mount Rushmore. I think that, like, for his achievement.
Tournaments. I think when the debate started first, and I must say the Mount Rushmore thing did get us through the first couple of months of the lockdown very well, because it prompted some great debates. But actually, more McGrath was in many of the selections at the time for his achievement, just because he was just a colossus on the field, and some of his performances, both certainly for Villa and Ireland, were just extraordinary, and Man United in the early days. But I just can't look past the sport that I'm obsessed with. I mean, there's no hurlers have been mentioned at all, so I get stick for that behind the scenes. But anyway, I just think that they're the players that sort of resonate with me. I mean, as this Dublin football team continues to unfold, there are many others like Dean Rock and Kieran Kilkenny, extraordinary individuals. Like again, a great time for wonderful characters in the game like Ger Brennan, and only too delighted to see that he's got one over on Rathnew, then in Wicklow in his first outing. But Ger again was he sums up the sort of part of what was changed in Dublin, making the very, very much like Pádraig Harrington and Greg Harrington, like the very, very best of his talent, and so a lot of great and another Northsider.
Not a single Nafina player mentioned here. I'm astounded.
Excuse me, I spoke about Dougie Farrell sort of non-stop.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So it's a lot of Vincent's Heads and somebody from Parnell's and Kevin Moore and Pádraig Harrington. And
I'm not going to play and Johnny Cooper.
No room for Dermot Connolly at the moment, anyway. Well, listen, Sean, you've been great with your time. Thanks very much for breaking the rules. But great to have you. And those are the votes of the Piper's Corner jury. Thanks a million.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the 4 names on North Dublin's Mount Rushmore, which will be going ahead for selection on Thursday. We're going to do the South Dublin tomorrow, and then the full one, which is North versus South and how they merge together, are going to be Brian O'Driscoll, John Giles, Liam Brady and Stephen Cluxton. They're the 4 names that are going forward after our various selections and selectors. We've come together and through the algorithm have come up with Giles, O'Driscoll, Cluxton and Liam Brady are going ahead from the north side, and we'll see what the south side put up on tomorrow's show. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to get involved in that conversation. I do want to remind you, though, today on the OTB Sports app, which is available in the App Store and in the Google Play Store, you just search OTB Sports and you'll get it. From 12 o'clock, it's a Jack Charlton special. We'll be playing you out all of the best highlights of the various people that we've spoken to, paying due deference and testimony and remembering and enjoying and luxuriating over the career that Jack Charlton had as the manager of the Republic of Ireland. And then at 12:30, we'll also be playing Put Him Under Pressure. So if you want some Jack Charlton goodness coming your way, then tune in to OTB Sports Radio. Just tell Alexa or Google Home to play OTB Sports Radio and tune in, and away you go. Off the Ball's back from 7 o'clock tonight. And a reminder as well that the latest episode of Alan Quinlan's How's the Head is coming up with the Dublin footballer Shane Carthy. That episode 4 airs exclusively today on the OTB Sports app at 2 o'clock. So that's the place to get that. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Best of luck.